You know what, Barrie? I am seeing buyers make the same mistakes over and over and over again.
What kind of mistakes are you seeing buyers make? Let's talk about that.
I mean, so it's hard this time of year. You know, you got some more inventory. You're working with some buyers, and sometimes they're first-time buyers, and they've got all these choices. And they may not know what they want, and then when they finally get that warm and fuzzy feeling, and you know, like they know when you walk in and you've seen 6 or 7 houses, and then you see their faces, and you're like, oh, this is going to be the one, and then they drag their feet.
Yes.
They drag their feet. They overanalyze everything.
Yes.
Yet they've seen 5 or 6 houses, and they know right away that that's not the house. But then when they walk into that house and you see the light on their face and you see them looking at each other, and I have to hold them back because there might be cameras and we don't want the other agent to know that they're in love with it. You know, I'm like, hold it down till we get out in the driveway, you know. But that you can just tell, and then they drag their feet.
Yeah.
And so, you know, one of the things that I have told my clients, my buyer clients, from the very beginning, or when I start to see those dragging the feet symptoms, I say, let's apply the 80-10-10 rule.
80-10-10 rule.
80-10-10 rule. You want to know what that is?
I love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 80-10-10 rule, and it really helps my buyers kind of put things into perspective. I tell them, if you walk through a house and you see 80% of everything in that house that you love, like you love 80% of it, that's a check mark. If they at 10% of it they can change, hey, who can't change 10%, right? It's 10%. So 80% they love, 10% that they can change, and then there's always going to be something you're going to have to live with, because unless you build that house, unless you pick the lot, unless you do this, nothing's perfect.
Right.
So 10% you can live with. I'm like, if you can put it in the 80-10-10 rule, this is a contender. And then don't drag your feet, because by the time it's okay, you don't want to rush into anything and have buyer's remorse, but there comes a time where you just have to pull the trigger. And if it's in that 80-10-10 after seeing, and navigating through the different locations and houses, you got to pull that trigger or someone else is gonna.
Yeah. I have buyers too that, sometimes they get a little frozen. They're like scared to pull the trigger on, and the market keeps moving. Market doesn't slow down. And so now I'm getting feedback where it's like, gosh, homes that we have loved and favorited, we're now seeing get under contract. And so it's, it is kind of coming back together and regrouping. All right, what are the priorities? Where do we want to be? What's the preferred price point? What are we willing to sacrifice? Because we're not going to necessarily get the 100% perfect house. What are those things that you can easily change, and that you don't have to change everything right away? It can be
put your own stamp on it.
Put your own, like, what do you need to live comfortably to get in, and then over the next couple years, kind of pace yourself and improve it.
80-10-10.
I love it.
It works
Such
every
a great,
time.
And
another thing that I think you mentioned, making sure that you're ready to go. Like even before you see that first house, right?
True.
Before you see the house, people are like, well, where do we get started? I'm like, let's talk to a lender. First of all, you met me. So number one, you've done a great job. I will help you. But the second thing is you've got to get a lender that is going to set you up for success. Because if not, there's all kinds of surprises. What are one of those surprises?
Well, so when you submit an offer, most listing agents require that you have a qualification letter, an approval letter, and it's important that buyers understand the difference. So a lender qualification, all you're doing is uploading your information. You can
like
go to
stated information.
Stated information. You can go to Rocket Mortgage onto their website and just plug in information, and it will spit out a letter of what
you're telling it.
what your qualification is. That's very different than a lender approval, where they've actually
pulled a letter.
They've pulled credit. They've pulled paychecks. They know how much verified income. Debt to income ratios. And so having that, out the gate is important, because, and I've, experienced, I know you have too, that the qualification, and clients are like, oh, we're not going to have any problems. And then you get down the road and there are bumps in the road, and you need additional things that need to be submitted to the lender because it wasn't submitted up front. So
and
it can make for a very stressful situation.
if you get the pre-approval, it's just a little bit more time, right?
Yes.
It's just a little bit more time. Go ahead and do that right now. And with, like Barrie said, with the pre-qualification, you're just stating the information on the website. With the pre-approval, you're actually submitting your paychecks and doing all those things. And it really gives you the bigger picture of what you can afford. How much money you need to put down. If there's anything on your credit report that you weren't aware of that maybe you need to pay off in order to qualify for a little bit more money. Because there's nothing worse than finding the home that you love and then going through the lending process, and now you have to come up with $25,000 more, or you have to come up with whatever, or you have to do this. And a lot of times in a 30 to 45 day close, you're not going to be able to do that in time. And the worst scenario is if it falls apart, because then you're losing things like your due diligence fees and things like that. So those are just some of the surprises that just a little bit more time.
I'll tell you, even kind of backing that up even more, there's a benefit to going ahead and talking to a lender 6 months, 9 months prior to when you're actually wanting to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Because if there are things that on your credit, your lender can help you create a plan to fix that. So that way, when you're ready to go ahead and get that house under contract, that you've got then superior credit, you're ready to go. And there again, you're relieving the stress because you already have those T's crossed, I's dotted, already have that.
One less thing you have to worry about.
Yeah, one less thing to worry about.
Focus on finding the house, which is the fun part.
That is the fun part.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of finding a house and writing an offer is one of the things that I find that buyers are surprised about, especially if they're not from the area, but maybe they haven't sold a house in the last 5 or 6 years since pre-COVID. Everything is now pre-COVID, but is the due diligence fee. And that is something that's really, really important. There's all kinds of strategy involved in that.
So what is a due diligence fee? So
Right.
North Carolina is unique. There are some other states that do have a due diligence, but North Carolina is unique where our contracts, we have a due diligence fee and an earnest money deposit. So what is a due diligence fee?
So a due diligence fee is a deposit paid directly to the seller, and it's non-refundable.
Non-refundable.
You don't close on that house, you don't see that money again.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, that's 99% of the time. And that is a really hard thing to wrap your brain around, because in North Carolina, like other states, there's not a contingency period. For example, New York has, in Florida, has a period, whether it's a financial, a lending contingency period or an inspection contingency period. There's not that here. Your due diligence fee, your suggested due diligence fee is made on your offer, and once that offer becomes a contract and it's executed, it's due, and you won't see that again. So it's really important, and that's on top of your earnest money deposit. Now, due diligence fees are credited when you close. It's credited towards the purchase price, and so is the earnest money. But if you don't close for whatever reason, that's very important to go back to your pre-approval. Because you will lose that if you do not close on that house. And there's some straries with.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. So talk about some of the strategies. I know how I've coached my clients. Whether you've got a house that's been sitting on the market and there's not a lot of demand. It's because it's non-refundable, that due diligence fee, and it's completely negotiable, right? There's not one set amount of money in that non-refundable due diligence fee. However, in a seller's mind, and in particular, I think, and tell me if you disagree, if you're going to go in with a much lower offer from their list price, maybe you offer them a higher due diligence fee.
Sweeten the deal.
Sweeten the deal.
Due diligence, because not all due diligence fees need to be high.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the differences why. And it's really important for the agent to know the demand on that house. If you see that showings, it's opening weekend, this house is a great value, you're gonna likely have to put in a high due diligence along with balancing your offer, because that seller, the due diligence is a reassurance to the seller that you've got skin in the game, that you're not gonna back out. Because what happens when you back out? You lose that due diligence fee.
Right.
So the higher the due diligence fee.
And you're compensating them, you're compensating the seller for their time that they're taking that house,
it's reassurance.
Off the market and putting it under contract. That's your time to do all your inspections and identify whether or not you're going to proceed with the sale.
Right.
And so it's a risk to the seller. And so
That due diligence fee is reassurance.
Yes.
That the buyer is not just shopping around and putting a little money here and a little money there.
It shows how serious you are about
the house.
About the house.
Now, when you don't want a high due diligence, sometimes, you're interested in a home that might be 40 years old. And while it looks beautiful on the inside, I mean, they have like the quartzite countertops and they've got all the bells and whistles, but you don't know what's behind those walls. Mm-hmm. You don't know what's living in that crawl space. I mean, you just don't know. So a lot of times in homes that are more mature, you want to be conservative with your due diligence. You want to be competitive with your due diligence, but you also don't want to put all your eggs in one basket because there might be something that comes back from that inspection report that you don't want to deal with. Like you're like, I just am not ready to scrape off all that asbestos or whatever it is that is turning you off. So you want to make sure that you are understanding that if you do back out, because it is an older home and you don't know, that you're not walking away from your life savings that you've just put up in due diligence. So you want to be a little more conservative with that.
And Jen and I will always walk, with our clients, right? Because it's very individual for, it's very circumstantial, right? Yeah. And you need to look at all the facts of the situation. Yeah. But as you're going through your due diligence, you're doing your home inspection, let's say you find a lot of things wrong with the house. The seller doesn't have to agree to make those repairs. It becomes another round of negotiations. Hopefully they're going to be motivated. They put their house on the market to begin with. But, the level of seller motivation might be dependent on how low your offer is. Yeah. So again, it's all those things to think about then and what you're putting in with that non-refundable due diligence. And a lot of strategy behind that.
It is. And strategy is something that we're great at.
Yes.
And it's really, really important to find an agent, whether you're in our area or you're working in another area, that you have an agent that is very aware of these things that we just talked about, because it's not just finding a house. It's literally, once you find that house, there's so much more. It's just the tip of the iceberg in getting to make your real estate goals come true and to financially protect you from some of these things that an agent that doesn't do this every day or isn't experienced with some of these obstacles. And we do. So, with that said, if you have any questions about that and the process and due diligence and some of these things we talked about, make sure you subscribe. You can also reach out to us directly. And we're happy to talk to you. So we will see you next time.
Make sure you subscribe.
Yes, definitely. Bye.
Thank you for joining us.